The morning I brought my daughter to surprise my husband at his office was the morning everything I thought I knew about my life turned out to be a lie. Lily had been asking about her father for weeks. Every night at dinner, she'd push her peas around her plate and say, "When's Daddy coming home?" And every night I'd say, "Soon, baby. Daddy's just really busy with the new merger." She was 4 years old. She didn't know what a merger was. She just knew her father hadn't been home for dinner in 3 weeks. I'd packed a little bag. His favorite chicken salad sandwich from the deli on Maple, a thermos of coffee the way he liked it, dark roast, no sugar, and I'd dressed Lily in the yellow dress with the daisies on it because she looked like sunshine in it, and I thought, maybe he needs a little sunshine today. Maybe we all do. My husband Vincent was the chief financial officer at Hargrove Capital, a mid-sized private equity firm in downtown Chicago. He'd worked his way up over 11 years, and I'd been there for every step. The late nights studying for his CFA, the years we lived on ramen and ambition in a one-bedroom in Wicker Park, the moment he called me from the parking garage after his promotion and cried. Actually cried. Because he said he couldn't have done it without me. I believed him. I believed everything he said. We'd been married 6 years. Lily came along in year 2, earlier than planned, but we figured it out. I put my interior temporarily, I told myself. And Vincent threw himself even harder into work. That was the deal, unspoken but understood. He built the income, and for a while, it worked. Lately, though, something had shifted. He came home after Lily was asleep and left before she woke up. He'd taken to keeping his phone face down on the counter. He smiled less. Or maybe he just smiled less at me. I told myself it was the merger stress. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself a lot of things. The Hargrove Capitol building had a lobby with marble floors and a reception desk staffed by a young woman named, I remember her name tag, Becca. I'd visited Vincent's office before, maybe twice in 11 years. He always said the office wasn't the kind of place you brought family. Too formal, too stuffy. But I wasn't there to impress anyone. I just wanted my husband to see his daughter's face. Lily held my hand tight as we crossed the lobby. She was wearing her little white sneakers, and she kept trying to slide on the marble. "Is Daddy's office shiny like this?" she whispered. "Even shinier," I said. Becca looked up when we approached. Something moved across her face. A flicker of something I couldn't name. "Hi there," I said warmly. "I'm Celeste Harmon, Vincent Harmon's wife. I wanted to stop by and surprise him with lunch." There was a pause. The said kind that lasts half a second too long. "Mrs. Harmon," Becca said carefully. "Mr. Harmon is actually in a meeting right now, a private one. He's left instructions not to be disturbed. I don't need to interrupt anything. We can wait in his office." Another pause. "I'm so sorry," she said, and she genuinely looked it. "He's asked that visitors wait down here." "All visitors," I smiled. "I'm not a visitor. I'm his wife." Becca glanced down at her desk. Then she looked at me with eyes that were trying to say something her mouth couldn't. "There's someone already up there," she said softly. "With him. In his office. She's been here since this morning." I stood very still. Lily tugged on my hand. "Mommy, are we going up to see Daddy?" I looked down at my daughter, her big brown eyes, her daisy dress, the little bag of lunch I was holding. "Give me just 1 second, Bug," I said. I looked back at Becca. I kept my voice completely even. "Is this a colleague?" Becca's expression was the answer. I said thank you, and I meant it. I picked up Lily, held her against my hip, and I walked back out through the marble lobby and through the revolving's door and onto Michigan Avenue, where the October wind hit me like a wall. I didn't cry. Not then. I put Lily in her car seat, handed her the juice box from my bag, and I sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel for a long moment. Then I called my brother. My older brother, Lawrence, answered on the second ring. "Hey, you okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be. There's something people don't know about my family unless they really know us. My father, Raymond Voss, spent 30 years building Voss Logistics into one of the largest regional freight companies in the Midwest. When he retired 3 years ago, he split ownership equally between his 4 children, me, Lawrence, my sister Margot, and our youngest brother Patrick. None of us runs the company day to day, but all of us sit on the board. All of us have weight to throw around if we choose to. Vincent knew this. He married into it. But somewhere along the way, I think he forgot that I was more than just a wife and a mother, that I had a last name before I took his. I had never once used my family's resources against him, not once. But sitting on Michigan Avenue with chicken salad going warm in a paper bag, and my daughter asking me why I looked sad, I thought, that changes today. Lawrence met me at my parents' house in Winnetka that afternoon. Margot drove in from Evanston. Patrick joined by video call from Dallas, his reading glasses pushed up on his head, looking annoyed in the way that meant he was worried. "Tell me everything," Lawrence said, "from the beginning." So I did. The late nights, the phone face down. The way he'd stopped asking about my day. The way he smiled at Lily like he was somewhere else. I told them about Becca's face in the lobby. I told them about the woman who'd been in his office since morning. How long have you suspected? Margot asked. Longer than I've admitted to myself, I said. My father listened from his armchair the whole time without saying a word. When I finished, he looked at Lawrence's, then at me. What do you need? He said. I need to know the truth before I do anything else, I said. And then I need to protect Lily. My father nodded once. That was all. I want to be very clear about something. I didn't fall apart. People expect that, I think, the wronged wife dissolving into grief and helplessness. But I was raised by a man who built something from nothing, and I was my father's daughter, and I had a 4-year-old looking at me to understand what stability looked like. So I held it together. I saved the falling apart. For 3 a.m. in the bathroom, water running so Lily couldn't hear. Lawrence had a contact, a former investigator who'd done background work for Voss Logistics vendor contracts. Within 48 hours, I had a name. Simone Beaumont, 31 years old. A consultant who'd been brought in by Hargrove Capital 8 months ago for a restructuring project. She had a condo in the Gold Coast, a closet full of designer clothes from what appeared to be a recently upgraded lifestyle. And according to the financial records my family's attorney was able to legally access several recent transactions at restaurants and hotels I recognized as places Vincent had told me were client dinners and off-site strategy sessions. 8 months. He'd been lying to me for at least 8 months. I sat with that number for a day, just sat with it. 8 months of looking my daughter in the eye and reading her bedtime stories and kissing her goodnight, and then going downstairs to text another woman. Then I stood up and I started making calls. My first call was to Judith Crane, the best family law attorney in Cook County. She was booked out 6 weeks, but she took my call the same afternoon because she'd done some consulting work for Voss Logistics the previous year, and Lawrence made a quiet introduction. We met the next morning. Have you said anything to your husband yet? She asked. Not a word, I said. She nodded approvingly. Good. Let's talk about what you have and what you can get. The thing about marrying someone is that you share a life, which means you share information. Over 6 years, I had absorbed a great deal of information about Vincent's financial life without ever intending to use it. I knew what accounts he kept. I knew about the investment portfolio he'd started before we married. I knew about the bonus structure at Hargrove Capital and the deferred compensation that vested over a 4-year schedule. But here's what I also knew, because I am my father's daughter, and I paid attention even when I seemed like I wasn't. Vincent had been angling for a seat on the Hargrove Capital Senior Leadership Committee for 2 years, and one of the 2 partners who controlled those appointments, a man named Douglas Hargrove, the founder's son, was currently in quiet discussions with Voss Logistics about a potential logistics partnership worth roughly $14 million annually. That conversation went through my father's office. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't make any calls to Douglas Hargrove. I simply had a conversation with my father and told him I was filing for divorce, and my father, who had been planning to finalize that partnership in the next 30 days, decided he needed a bit more time to think things over. When I tell this story, people always ask, was that wrong? Was it unfair? And I always say, my husband decided to be unfair first. I filed the paperwork on a Thursday. I had Judith send a formal notice to Vincent's office that afternoon so that when he sat down at his desk on Friday morning, he would understand immediately and completely that I was not confused, I was not emotional, and I was not bluffing. He called me 4 times before noon. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. He came home that evening for the first time in what felt like weeks. Lily was in her pajamas watching a cartoon when he walked in, and she ran to him immediately because she was 4 and she loved her father, and she hadn't been told anything yet about what was happening. I watched him hug her from across the room, and I made myself feel that, really feel it, because I needed to remember why I was doing what I was doing. He looked at me over her head. He looked scared. Good, I thought. We put Lily to bed together and then we sat across from each other at the kitchen table where we'd eaten 1,000 dinners and he started talking. He said it hadn't meant anything. He said he'd been feeling lost and disconnected and that she had made him feel seen. He said he was sorry. He said he loved me. He said he wanted to fix things. I let him finish. Vincent, I said. How long, Celeste? How long? He looked at the table. About 8 months. I nodded. I'd already known. But hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that paperwork doesn't. Lily loves you, I said. That's not going to change. But you and I are done, and I need you to understand something. I leaned forward slightly. I have been very quiet about my family's involvement in your professional life for 6 years. I have stayed in the background and let you build your career and take your credit, and I have not once asked for anything in return except honesty. You couldn't give me that. So we're going to go through this process the right way. And you are going to cooperate, or things will become significantly more complicated for you at work. He stared at me. Are you threatening me? I'm describing a reality, I said. The partnership discussions with Douglas Hargrove. They go through my father's office. I think you knew that. I think you forgot that I know that. The color drained from his face. I'm not trying to ruin you, I said quietly. I just need you to stop underestimating me. My attorney had advised me to document everything, so I did. I had records. I had texts, legally obtained through a process I won't detail here. I had hotel receipts. I had the timeline. I had everything Judith needed to establish fault, which in Illinois doesn't directly affect divorce proceedings, but matters enormously when it comes to demonstrating a pattern of deception in custody arrangements. Lily's custody arrangement was the only thing I truly cared about. The mediation process took 11 weeks. Vincent's attorney was very good. Vincent himself tried, twice, to change his position on the settlement once he realized how much he stood to lose. But Judith was better than his attorney, and my documentation was thorough, and every time he tried to renegotiate, I simply waited and said nothing. I learned that from my father. When the other person is flailing, the most powerful thing you can do is be still. During those 11 weeks, I moved back into my parents' house in Winnetka with Lily. My mother, who had spent 40 years beside my father and understood marriage and its complications better than anyone I knew, said very little and did everything. She stocked the kitchen with Lily's favorite foods. She babysat so I could meet with Judith, came into my room on the bad nights and sat on the edge of my bed, and rubbed my back the way she had when I was small, and the world was manageable. Lawrence handled the business side of things. He didn't weaponize the Hargrove partnership. That would have been too direct, too obviously retaliatory. But he made sure the timeline stayed uncertain. The due diligence kept finding small issues to resolve. The decision kept getting pushed. The partnership never fell through. It just never moved forward either. Not while the divorce was pending. Douglas Hargrove apparently grew impatient enough to make some comments about it to the managing partners at the firm. I don't know exactly what was said. I only know what I heard secondhand. That Vincent's path to the senior leadership committee quietly stalled. My brother Patrick from Dallas had an additional contribution. His college roommate ran a boutique headhunting firm that placed executives at competitor firms. This roommate reached out to Simone Beaumont professionally, not about Vincent, just about career opportunities. She'd taken the call. She'd left Hargrove Capital before the divorce was finalized. I didn't ask Patrick to do that. He did it on his own. That's what siblings are for. The settlement came through on a Friday in January, cold and gray. The kind of Chicago winter day that makes you understand why people move to Florida. Vincent got a fair settlement. I hadn't been trying to bankrupt him. I'd been trying to protect my daughter and myself. But I retained primary custody of Lily. The Winnetka house we'd bought together was sold and the equity split. And he agreed to a child support arrangement that Judith described as appropriate given the income disparity and fault documentation. He signed at 2:15 in the afternoon. I shook Judith's hand in the parking garage, called Lawrence, and then sat in my car for a while. I thought about the morning I'd walked across that marble lobby with a chicken salad sandwich and a thermos of coffee and a little girl in a daisy dress. I thought about Becca's face and what it had cost her to be kind enough to tell me the truth without saying a word. I thought about all the dinners I'd made and all the mornings I'd packed Lily's lunch and all the times I'd assumed the distance was about work stress. And not about me, not about him choosing someone else. I was angry, yes. But underneath the anger was something else, something quieter. Relief, maybe, that I knew. Relief that I wasn't going to spend another year or 2 or 5 being lied to. Lawrence took me and the kids. He has 3. Lily loves her cousins out for dinner that night at a steakhouse on the north side. Margot brought her husband and a bottle of champagne she said she'd been saving. Patrick sent flowers and a card that said, in his very Patrick way, "Voss women don't stay down. Love you," my mother cried a little. Happy tears, I think, or something complicated enough that happy and sad weren't separate anymore. Lily sat between me and my mother and ate an enormous plate of mac and cheese and declared it the best dinner she'd ever had. She still didn't fully understand what had changed. She knew her daddy didn't live with us anymore. She knew she saw him on Wednesdays and every other weekend. She knew her grandparents' house had become her house, at least for now. One night, a few weeks later, she climbed into the morning the way she sometimes did, pressing her warm small body against my side. And she said, quietly, "Mommy, is Daddy going to be okay?" I held her tighter. "Yes, baby," I said, "and so are we." She was quiet for a moment. "Daddy made you sad," she said. Not a question, a statement. "He did," I said. "But I'm not sad anymore." She thought about that. Then, "Good," she said, with the absolute certainty of a 4-year-old, and she fell asleep with her hand curled around my finger. I didn't sleep for a while after that. I lay there in the dark and I thought about what it means to build a life, and what it means to have it change, and whether the version of myself who'd packed that sandwich and driven downtown with her daughter was the same person lying in this bed right now. I decided she was, just clearer, maybe. Cleaner. Like something that had been polished by pressure until it finally showed what it was made of. Spring came slowly that year, the way it always does, then rain, then finally something that actually feels like it might stay. I found a small studio space in Lincoln Park and started taking design clients again. Just a few. A young couple renovating a Lincoln Square bungalow. A retired teacher who wanted to redo her kitchen. Small projects, manageable mine. My first paycheck in 4 years, I framed it and hung it on the wall of the studio. My assistant thought it was quirky. I thought it was necessary. Lily started a new preschool. She made a best friend named Ruby, and came home with her shoes perpetually untied and her hair full of craft glitter, and she was thriving, so I was thriving. And the days got longer and warmer, and the city opened itself back up the way Chicago always does when it remembers it's allowed to be beautiful. Vincent and I found a rhythm, the way you have to when there's a child between you who loves you both. It's not easy, it's not natural, but it's possible if you're both committed to the right thing. And I think in the end, Vincent understood what the right thing was. One afternoon in April, I picked Lily up from his place after the weekend, and she bounced out to the car and said, "Daddy and I made waffles." And I said, "That sounds amazing," and I meant it. That's parenthood, I think. Loving the same small person from different directions. I am 36 years old. I have a daughter who tells me things, and a family who shows up, and a studio with my name on the door, and a framed check on the wall that is worth approximately 47 times less than the feeling it gives me every time I look at it. I lost a husband. I found myself. Some mornings I still drive past the Hargrove Capitol building when I'm heading downtown, and I think about Becca and her careful eyes, and the half-second pause that changed everything, and I think, thank you, whoever you are. Thank you for the look that told me what I needed to know. The marble lobby catches the morning light and throws it across the sidewalk in long bright lines, and I drive on through it, and I don't stop.